Hello there, and a very warm welcome. In this explainer, we're going to get to grips with a term you've almost certainly heard, but one that's incredibly important to understand properly: safeguarding. It's a concept that's absolutely fundamental to creating a safe and dignified society for everyone.
Right. It's a word we hear bandied about a lot, isn't it? Especially in places like schools, hospitals, or local community centres. But if we're honest, it can sometimes feel a bit like jargon, a box-ticking exercise. So what on earth does safeguarding actually mean in practice? Let's unpack that together.
So, here's our plan for the next few minutes. We'll kick off by defining what safeguarding really is. Then, we'll draw a really crucial line between being proactive and reactive. After that, we'll dive into the core principles that guide good practice, learn how to spot the signs of harm, and we'll finish up with the most important part: what your role is in this whole vital process. Right then, let's start with the absolute basics, the foundation of it all. What are we truly talking about when we use this word safeguarding? Here we have it, the official definition. Safeguarding is the proactive process of protecting people's health, their well-being, and their human rights. Now, that word proactive is the key to the whole thing. It's all about getting ahead of problems, about preventing them before they can even start. And while you might associate it with certain institutions, it's really a universal responsibility for any organization that deals with the public. So who are we focusing on? Well, primarily, these safeguarding frameworks are built to protect two main groups. First, children and young people, and that means anyone under the age of 18. And second, what we call adults at risk. Now, that refers to any adult who, perhaps because of illness, disability, or their age, might not be in a position to protect themselves from harm or exploitation. Let's build on that proactive idea, shall we? This next section is all about a really vital distinction that sits right at the heart of this topic: the difference between being proactive and being reactive. It's a game changer once you grasp it. I think this is a brilliant way to put it. It just makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Think of it like this. Protection is the fire engine racing to your house when it's already ablaze. Safeguarding is the smoke alarm you installed months ago, the fire-retardant materials you used to build it, and the escape plan you have on the wall. It's all the stuff you do beforehand. And this chart illustrates that difference perfectly. Over on the left, you've got safeguarding. That's all the proactive, preventative stuff. We're talking about doing background checks on staff, having really clear codes of conduct, and just generally fostering a safe culture. And on the right is protection. Now, protection is part of safeguarding, but it's the reactive bit. It's the specific actions you take when you believe someone is already suffering or is in immediate danger of significant harm. So we have our definition, and we understand that safeguarding is all about being proactive. But what are the ideas that actually guide all this? Let's take a look at the philosophical framework, the core ideas that underpin all professional safeguarding work. These 6 principles are essentially the ethical rulebook for any safeguarding work. Empowerment is a huge one. It's about making sure the person at the center of it all has a voice and control over the decisions being made about them. Prevention and protection, well, we've just covered those. Proportionality simply means our response should be the least intrusive it can possibly be. And finally, partnership and accountability remind us that this isn't a solo effort. It's about working together, transparently, often with services like the police or social care, to create a proper safety net. All right, that's the theory done and dusted. But how does any of this apply in the real world? This next section is all about shifting from these abstract ideas to some very practical skills, specifically the absolutely critical skill of recognizing when something might be wrong. When we think of harm, I think our minds often jump straight to physical injury. A broken bone, a bruise, but that is only one tiny piece of a much larger, more complex puzzle. Harm can be incredibly subtle, it can be emotional, and it can show up in lots of different ways. Being effective at safeguarding means keeping our eyes peeled for all of them. Let's take emotional harm, for example. The signs aren't always going to be obvious. Yes, it could be someone facing constant put-downs or threats, but what you might actually see is a change in their behavior. A person who was always outgoing, who has suddenly become withdrawn, or terribly anxious, or seems to have lost all their self-confidence. Another form is neglect, which, as I mentioned, is often about what isn't happening. It's the failure to provide for a person's most basic needs. We're talking food, appropriate clothing, or access to a doctor. The signs you might spot could be poor hygiene, clothes that just aren't right for the weather, or a state of just deep, persistent exhaustion. And of course, we have to be aware of the other major forms of harm: These include physical abuse, which is what we often think of first, but also financial misuse, especially of vulnerable adults, sexual abuse or exploitation, and even things like modern slavery, which can include forced labor or human trafficking. Okay, this brings us to our final and, frankly, most important section. Knowing all of this, what is your role? What are you supposed to actually do? Well, the good news is there's a very clear, very simple procedure to follow, often known as the 3 Rs.
And there they are. Simple as that. Recognize, record, and report. It's a wonderfully straightforward and actionable model that absolutely anyone in any role can remember and use if they ever have a safeguarding concern.
So, the first step, recognize, is about everything we've just been talking about. It's about being observant. It's about paying attention and noticing those subtle shifts in someone's behavior, spotting any physical signs, or clocking any red flags in their environment that just don't sit right with you. Step 2 is to record. If you have a concern, you must write it down, and as soon as you possibly can. The absolute key here is to be objective. Jot down exactly what you saw or heard, the facts, not your own interpretations or opinions. So for instance, you'd write, John had a large purple bruise on his left arm, not, I think John's been hit by someone. See the difference? And the final critical step is to report. You cannot keep this information to yourself. You have to pass it on. In almost every organization, there will be a designated safeguarding lead, or DSL. That's your go-to person. If you've no idea who that is, or you're not in an organization, then you would contact your local social services or even the police. Now, please listen very carefully to this because it's so important. It is not your job to investigate. It is not your job to prove or disprove anything. You are not a detective. Your responsibility, your entire role, is simply to pass that piece of the puzzle on to the trained experts who know how to take the appropriate next steps. It really lowers the barrier to taking action. You don't have to solve it, you just have to report it. So, as we draw things to a close, let's circle right back to where we started. The entire philosophy of safeguarding, the whole point of it, is about a massive cultural shift. It's about moving our collective thinking away from just fixing problems after they've happened and towards building systems and creating environments that prevent those problems from ever happening in the first place. And that really leaves us with one final thought to take away with you. You see, understanding the principles is a fantastic first step, but the real work happens when we apply them. So the question I want to leave with all of us is this. In our own workplaces, in our local communities, and in our day-to-day lives, how can each of us play our part in building a genuine, lasting culture of safety?